All right, so now that you understand sort of how deformers work, I should have saved my original cube, that would have been helpful. I'm going to just go ahead and run through a few of the different types of deformers that exist. So I'll go ahead and just make a new random cube, and I will actually duplicate this one. So if you go again, deform, nonlinear, I'll look at the bend deformer this time. So again, same thing, just click on the little bend handle here, and you'll see there's some options. In this case, when we mess with the curvature, you can see it's sort of, we've made Pac-Man with like some kind of crazy laser mouth. We get curvature this way, and again, once again, you can mess with like the high or the low bounds to sort of like straighten out different areas of your little curvy object. Now, if you want to change the bend of this, what you can do is rotate the handle itself, because again, you can move these freely, so we can make some kind of insane looking little wave thing. One thing I use these for really, really commonly, honestly, is to just make rings. So if you bend this 180 degrees, it'll make a nice perfect circle for you, which, for a tube is kind of silly, but what I usually end up using this for is doing some kind of weird complex design. You could use text or whatever, and then bend it just into a perfect 180 degree little circle, and that's pretty handy. Once again, if you move the deformer, you can sort of change how this is. That's actually pretty cool looking. You can, do some weird effects with that. And just by changing the overall sort of however this is bending or moving, you can do some really crazy stuff and, destroy your mesh if you're so inclined. Let me, just for grins, because why is my type thing? That's irritating. Get this up in like 5 seconds. Type. It always bothers me when the type thing doesn't load. So it may not seem, again, inherently useful to make just like a silly cylinder kind of thing. But like I said, you can use it for text and a bunch of other random things. So this is, if you ever for some reason are really hell-bent on making like text on a curve or something like that in Maya, usually I'll do it with that. I'm just going to give this a mesh cleanup really quick so that the faces are not giant hellish n-gons. And a lot of times the text, usually, if you can create it, there's settings in it where you can make it with more subdivisions. A lot of times that works a little bit better. But again, you can just use the bend deformer on this. The bend deformer. Haha. And then you can do... What am I doing right now? Why can I not click on buttons? There we go. And you can make, your crazy, weird, bendy text effects. So if you ever, again, needed to make text into like a ring or a perfect circle for some strange reason, you can do that very easily with a bend deformer. So this is usually what I use it for, just making like weird complex designs, and then I'll come through and, just bend them. It's easier to make them flat, and then I'll just handle them into place. If you're planning on doing that, just make sure that you have enough geometry. Like, again, this T is like a little bit, could use, some subdivisions going this way to prevent it from stretching really crazy. So just sort of like design with this in mind if you know that's your plan. The type tool is not necessarily ideal for doing that all the time. So that's the bend handle. Let me unhide my silly cube wall. The other deformers that I use, so honestly, like I said, these all kind of work the same way. The other one that I use semi-frequently, I guess, is a flare deformer. And that's mostly, you can control basically like the scaling of the top or the bottom individually, and they give you like lots of different settings, so you can control it in different directions as you so choose. And again, we have the high bound and the low bound. So I mean, something like this, honestly, I would usually just sort of model it by hand. So I'm just going to go ahead and actually delete this and try another random deformer. So the other thing I know people use, so wave and sine are pretty similar in the way that they work. The curves themselves are just a little bit different. So I would recommend actually just sort of going through and playing with those on your own, because they do work, again, fairly similarly. Where am I going? All right, so theoretically, all right, so here we go. So once you actually, set some amplitude, what you can do is go through and change the wavelength and then mess with the amplitude again. Again, then it'll give you this like weird, like wiggly, sort of strange effect there. And if we go through and again sort of change the direction of this, you'll see it's, as we rotate this, it's behaving differently. The fun thing with these is to really, like, I've seen people use these to pretty reasonable effect as like snakes, where they'll sort of like move their object through this. And then the other thing, so I mentioned you can combine deformers, so if perhaps you wanted to add in a bend deformer into this, you could do that. And you would just want to go in and theoretically, like let's say the snake is sort of bending in a curved way or something weird, it'll make this curvature more aggressive. So what you can do is sort of, you can see that's also pretty effectively changing the way that this thing behaves. So you can stack these however much you want. Usually if I'm stacking stuff, I'll do like a twist and a bend. I don't tend to mess with the waves as much. They're just not useful for what I do, but these are super, super handy just in general. The other thing you can do, and this is not, it's not a nonlinear deformer, but like still useful. If you go into Deform and Lattice Deformer, this works if you've ever used like Photoshop or what have you. I'm just gonna go ahead and apply this, and off the top, or like sort of off the bat, you'll notice it adds these two little nodes into your outliner. And if you click on that, you can select the lattice points, at which point you can sort of grab one corner if you wanted and like move this out. And this is going to give you a really nice sort of uniform deformation to your piece. So you don't need to construct this manually. It's just done for you very, very easily. And of course you can go back in, to that lattice. And if you wanted to, you could, you know, move the other random mesh pieces. You can still obviously, like this is now sort of broken the mesh, but so a lot of times I'll use these for specifically like scaling armor. If I ever like find an armor file I want to 3D print and I'm like, wow, it's, you know, way too big in the chest or something, I'll just like scale down the, what am I doing? I'll just sort of scale, why is this not letting me scale this? What? Weird. But you know, I mean, you can just sort of modify it like this. So a lot of times I use it like a flare deformer. It just gives me a little more control. The other nice thing about lattice deformers is that if you want to, you can add in more lattice points to these. Oops. Did I just add a lattice deformer onto nothing? Seems like I did. So by controlling these divisions here, you can see now you have more points to manipulate. So if I could go in and, you know, mess with this one point here, which is actually not do anything because, again, I don't have the geometry running vertically to support that. But what I could do is grab this one, and you'll see that now we have, it's not dragging the whole side, it's dragging like part of the side. So you can sort of mess with those as necessary. The only thing I really kind of want to point out about these is, and this is perhaps not the best mesh to demo this on, but sometimes the transitions are not the smoothest. So like if you do this, it doesn't, if you're looking at the deformer itself, you can see it's just like a line and a line. Like this is just a hard point. Some of them do a better job. Some other programs use lattice deformers and they'll do a better job of sort of interpolating like a smooth bend. Maya doesn't do that as well. So it's just kind of make sure that like you have enough lattice points to do what you need and like give you a smooth curve. The other thing you could do is turn on soft select. So as you do this, and then it'll sort of move things, and it's not perfect, but it helps a little bit, kind of. But just a thing to be aware of. But lattice deformers are actually like super helpful. And I think that is pretty much all the deformers I wanted to go over with you guys. There's a few more. I'll do a wire texture in a different video. But yeah, so I mean, deformers are pretty helpful for modeling just in general. I'll do a little bit on the texture deformer because that's also fairly helpful. But